Hello and welcome to the channel Dymphna's Devotion. I am Dymphna's devoter, Luke. You can just call me Luke. I had this idea for a Catholic YouTube channel for a long time now. Couldn't figure out not only what I wanted to name it, what I wanted the theme to be. Obviously, I wanted it to be Catholic, but I just couldn't quite figure out the tone and exactly what I wanted to talk about. Did I want to talk about the Bible? Did I want to talk about current events in Catholicism? Did I want to talk about culture and media? Did I want to talk about politics? I don't want to talk about politics. So, you know what? I decided to pick a saint. At first, I picked St. Michael. And I was going to call this YouTube channel something based off of St. Michael. I won't say what it was. I already forgot. But then I realized, you know what? Why don't I name it after my patron saint? St Dymphna, who's actually only just recently become my patron saint, which is funny because she's not my confirmation saint. My confirmation saint was St. Luke the Evangelist, because at that time, it just made sense to me. I was named after him. Since then, when you do more research and you learn more and more about saints, your fave five changes, and you realize it's not the saints that you choose. It's the saints who choose you. And we're going to get to that a little bit more in a few minutes. Just please bear with me here. This is my first video, not on YouTube entirely. This is my first video on this channel. And I wanted this channel to have a specific tone. And I wanted the tone to be perfect. And I wanted the tone to be respectful toward Catholicism and toward my patron saint, St. Dymphna. And all due respect to every Catholic YouTuber out there. We need more Catholic voices on the platform. I decided to set myself a little bit apart from the others by not using my real name as the channel, by having the channel's focus be someone other than me. Kind of like, well, I use St. Luke as a bit of inspiration here. He did not insert himself in the Bible at all. He was mentioned very little in the entire Bible. So I was pretty inspired by that. St. Luke seemed like a pretty humble saint, and I appreciate that. I have a lot of respect for that. I'm trying to work on my humility. And I thought, well, first step toward that, regarding this channel anyway, is not using my real name, not making myself be the focus of this channel, and just letting St. Dymphna guide me and guide the tone and theme of my YouTube channel. And I already had recorded a first video for this channel. This is not my first attempt at a video for this specific channel, but I had a few problems with it. My tone, I was coming off as a little too hyper. I figure we're going to ease into that maybe later when it's appropriate. But this video is going to cover some pretty dark and serious matter. After all, we're getting into the life and death of St. Dymphna. Also, I thought my original attempt was too scripted, and I just wasn't interested in that. I want to be myself while simultaneously not making this channel about myself. Okay, we cleared that up. Time to stop beating around the flaming bush here and just get on with it. So did I mention that St. Dymphna chose me? Well, I did mention that the saints choose you. So how do you know that? How indeed? Because this is not something I knew. This is what I had learned earlier this year, in fact, listening to Father Carlos Martin, being absolutely addicted to his Exorcist Files podcast. I think you should check it out. So like I said, how do you know when the saints choose you? Ooh, boy, I cannot wait to get into that. I mean, after all, myself and St. Dymphna, we walked this earth about, well, over 1,200 years apart? I'm not the greatest at math. Let's see here. When did she die? She died in the 7th century. She was a princess, in fact. Princess in Ireland. And I was born in the 1980s. I'm old, but not quite as old as St. Dymphna. So I never knew her personally. We had never really met each other face to face, but she always knew me. She was there for me well before I could count the amount of saints that I knew on both hands. All right, I know you can learn who St. Dymphna is on any other YouTube channel, and it'd take you probably 2 to 5 minutes. And me, I'm gonna ramble quite a bit, and it's gonna be heavily edited. There's gonna be a lot of jump cuts because I'm trying to save you a little bit of time, and I do tend to ramble. The difference between those videos and this one, however, is that this one is going to be a lot more personal. I mean, a lot more personal. I am going to show you some wounds here. And so far, I only have one subscriber. And I know very little about you, but hi and welcome, by the way. St Dymphna was a princess born of royalty to a petty king named King Damon. And her Catholic mother, well, her identity remains unknown. Now, there's a strong likelihood that King Damon knew about St Dymphna's Catholic upbringing, and maybe he just didn't care. He was just so in love with his wife that it just didn't faze him at all. I'm sure he knew about his wife's Catholic roots. They probably saw something in each other, and maybe she got her, I don't know, her king maxing on and thought, you know what? I can change him. Good thing only women back then had that mindset. Women don't think that way today. Of course not. And neither do men. Okay, let's focus on St Dymphna here. She was 14 years old when she decided to submit fully to Jesus. So based on my research, it was right around that time when St Dymphna was 14 and had already taken her vow of chastity that her mother had passed away. From what? I don't know exactly. It was the 7th century. I'm thinking it was allegedly an illness. This led King Damon into a deep depression. His mental health just deteriorated. I mean, he had just lost the woman that he loved. And his counselors suggested that he should just get over it by remarrying. But King Damon wasn't going to just settle for anybody. He wanted someone that reminded him of his wife. If you've seen Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo, you're probably already getting those vibes. But I guess there's some sort of psychology to actually study there, which is perfect because St. Dymphna and psychology go hand in hand, being that she is the patroness of mental illnesses. The king's men scoured all throughout Ireland. I don't know if they restricted themselves solely to Ireland. All of these things happened within rapid-fire succession of each other. The next events that I'm going to go over here happened within about maybe a year and a half. It happened between St. Dymphna was 14 and 15. King Damon's men returned, not being able to find anyone who was as beautiful, and they said, well, the only woman that we could find that looked even remotely like your wife was your daughter. And this is where it gets dark and really creepy. This is why St. Dymphna can be pretty difficult to talk about when we go over her superhero origin story. So what was it about St. Dymphna that really reminded King Damon of his late wife? Well, likely the red hair, the green eyes, the freckles. We're assuming this is what St. Dymphna looked like. We don't really know. It might be a whole lot easier to do accurate genealogy and research on her since she was royalty. Her life would probably be documented a lot more, and therefore her physical appearance might also be documented somewhat. But anyway, St. Dymphna just had the look that her father was looking for. Yeah, I know, incest. Ew, that's nobody's favorite subject. Dymphna eventually caught wind of this. I'm not sure how she heard about this, who she heard about it from, possibly from the court jester, and she hid. She hid in, from what I recall, was a pile of hay somewhere out in the... And she couldn't be found. And she fled in the night. And that's why one of her trademark items that you see in a lot of artwork of her, she's holding a lantern. She's often holding a lantern, or she's holding a Bible with the clover leaf on the cover, clover leaf cross. Sometimes she's also holding the sword that... Spoilers! We'll get to that later. But you've probably already figured it out by now, haven't you? And if you already knew who Dymphna was, then, well, you already know anyway. But thank you for watching all the same. Dymphna intended to protect her purity and her virginity, especially. It was gross that her father wanted to marry her. Yes. Allegedly, there are sources suggesting that he was going to have his way with her sexually, not just put a ring on her finger and have her sit next to him on the throne. There are suggestions by researchers that he had a third, put it that way. All the kids know what I mean when I say that. All right. Dymphna got together with her priest, the priest that she confessed to frequently, named Father Garabernus. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And they also brought with them a couple of trusted servants of Dymphna and the court jester. When I was researching this story on Wikipedia, I looked up this story everywhere, by the way. But Wikipedia cites the court jester as the king's fool. But the fool was wise to flee with Dymphna. So they sailed the high seas to the continent that we all know as Europe or Eurasia, whatever your preference is. And they eventually got to a country that we now know as Belgium, and a town we now know as Giel, which now has a St Dymphna church, and I do aspire to see it in person one of these days. You know, Belgium's got the best waffles ever. They do. I have no reason to be biased. I have like 0.0001% of Belgian blood in my DNA, but they still got the best waffles. Also, Skipperkeys are from Belgium, and that's my favorite dog breed. They are lovable, and they're charming. We'll probably talk more about those later. So this is a very important part of the story here, and this is what also put Dymphna on the map in sainthood. Dymphna basically started her life all over again in Giel, Belgium. She was a former princess, and now she basically used her finances to build a hospital to take in the poor, the sick, the needy. I don't know if it was the mentally ill. All I could find out was that she took in the sick. And that's probably something that she wanted to do anyway. And I wouldn't doubt for a moment that the death of her mother really lit a fire under her, a passion that inspired her to just be like, you know what, I don't want to see this happen to anyone else. I want to help people. However, they didn't really have a conversion system at that time. She couldn't take her dinero and convert it into a euro. No, the money that she had with her was unique to that part of Ireland. It was not very well known or very commonly seen in Belgium. So we're all familiar with the term follow the money trail, right? Well, this literally happened in Dymphna's story, where eventually word would get around about the currency that she was using all the way back to her hometown, where King Damon would find out, hey, that could be my daughter over there. Better go get her. So he brought a bunch of his men with him, sailed the high seas to Europe. I don't know if they took their own boat. Honestly, I don't even know exactly how Dymphna got there. Did they sneak aboard on a ship as stowaways? I'm not entirely sure. All I could find out is that they traveled. Traveling from island to continent back in those days, you only had one option. You didn't have United Airlines or anything like that. Nope. You had one option. Boat. Big boat. Which was scary back then. I mean, you know, think about it. You gotta be sailing with somebody who really knows their way around. I mean, somebody who knows their whole star charts, where your east and west is, and which way the wind is blowing and all that stuff, because there's no GPS back then. Well, anyway, King Damon would catch up with his daughter, and first took her priest and slayed the priest first, right in front of her. I imagine to use as some sort of punishment or intimidation. He was not right in the head, and the frustrations of having to go to another island or go to another continent to catch his daughter, that his frustration levels must have skyrocketed from that, not to mention losing his wife. But Dymphna persisted with a holy stubbornness. She did not want to go back to Ireland. She did not want to have anything to do with marrying her father, or, you know, the very uncomfortable word of family on family. Probably out of a rage, King Damon just beheaded her. So she was only 15 when she died. The residents of Giel gathered up the remains of the priest and Dymphna, put them in a cave until they, I guess, changed their minds later on, and put them somewhere more respectable, relocated them, if you will. And now you could probably find Dymphna's first-class relics in Giel, Belgium, and from what I heard, also in Ohio, at a town called, I'm going to mispronounce this, Massillon? You know what, now I really have to. We'll do another video on that later. I promise. So Dymphna wasn't canonized until about 600 years later, give or take. Now, there's a reason for that. So canonization processes can take a long time. You know, you have your exceptions. You have your Pope John Paul II's, and you have your Padre Pios, and you have your Carlo Acutis's, and their canonizations took a relatively short time. But, you know, we also right now live in an era where it's hard to have a private life. Back then, it was very easy to be like, who is St Dymphna? The Vatican makes the decisions to canonize saints. Well, actually, heaven does. We'll talk about that in another video as well. Word about Dymphna probably took a while to get around to the Vatican. And of course, they have to start doing research on the life of the saint before they begin the canonization process. They have to make sure, are these miracles legit that are being performed? Are these actual miracles, or are these people just faking? Okay, miracles are proven. I don't know if it's one miracle that needs to happen or if it's two. I'll have to check back on that. And then they have to research the saint. So what was this person like when they were alive? Why would heaven want to shine the spotlight on them? And the Vatican 600 years later were probably like, oh, this Dymphna person, wow, she gave her life to Jesus at 14, fled from her father to build a hospital in Geel, Belgium. Okay. And there are miracles of healings taking place, because usually it's a healing, which is the miracle. Okay. All right. Got your canonization. Of course, I gave you the abridged version. And currently, St. Dymphna's feast day is May 30th. It's been changed from another date. So her patronage is that she covers mental illness. She covers virginity. But she's mostly well known for mental illness, which ranges from depression to autism to Alzheimer's to feminism to transgenderism. And these are all very mental things, so no, I'm not joking. You know, you can think of a mental illness. St. Dymphna covers that. Covers depression, anxiety. Okay, Luke. They get the point, Luke. They get the point. I have afflictions of my own up there. We all have anxiety. We all get depression. My mental illnesses have an interesting and unique variety. I'm not going to get too deep into them because this is a YouTube channel and we can always talk about it another time. But my biggest affliction is that, yes, there is at least one suicide in my bloodline. Very close to me. So the person in question is my dad. I lost him when I was very young. I wasn't even 10 yet. My dad, he had a lot of demons that he was struggling with. His reason for his depression was likely the abuse that he received as a child, probably from his dad and allegedly from another elder in his life. I'm not exactly sure who, and I don't fully know the story anyway. All the information I really have is probably, but being treated roughly by his dad, my grandfather, because he had, I don't want to say he had a very German upbringing, but my grandpa was a German traditionalist, you could say, that wasn't exactly going about things the right way 100% of the time. A lot of these things just weighed heavily on my dad's mind. And I would see it too. I read a suicide letter. That was rough. I didn't fully understand it. And at the same time, I did. Well, I understood the shame that he felt. Yeah, so you have people who commit suicide because they just don't see any light at the end of the tunnel. They just don't see any way out of it. Their loss of hope just spirals out of control. So to say that he was battling a lot of personal demons, I don't literally mean that he was demonically oppressed or anything like that. This has to do with human nature. Well, as far as I know. I mean, at the same time, I don't want to peel back the curtain to find out. That would make an interesting subject for another video in the future, because I have taken a bit of a peek behind the veil. Can't wait to make a video about that. And it's Halloween. But anyway, yeah, my dad just had a lot going on in his head. And real depression is not just, I'm feeling kind of sad today. I'm feeling lonely, just things are just not going my way. No, real depression is you feel like you're drowning and you feel like you're just trying as hard as possible to swim out and swim upward. But all that's happening is you just keep sinking lower. Right at the very beginning of my Christmas break, right before Christmas, that he pulled the trigger on himself. Yeah, talk about A Nightmare Before Christmas. And ironically, it was the exact same year that that movie came out. I really don't like that movie, but for different reasons. I didn't like the movie just because I didn't like the movie. I always liked the animation, but even when I first saw it before my dad died, I didn't care for it. Anyway, it was something that was very difficult for me to overcome. It still is. The grieving process, you could argue, lasts the rest of your life. I had to learn to make peace with it. I had to learn to reconcile. It's funny because I never wanted to blame my dad for anything. I never really wanted to be angry or feel any kind of resentment for doing that. I was frustrated that it happened, yes. But I never saw him as weak for having done that. Instead, my initial reaction was, it was my fault, right? You know, that's just what a lot of people go through. And if you haven't been through that, if you haven't known someone, if you didn't have anyone close to you, like super close to you, that committed suicide, then you're just not going to understand that feeling at its fullest, at the very least. It's easy to say, oh, yeah, you know, I understand. But actually living through it, that's just, oh, man, that's a whole different story. So it took a really long time for me to realize that it wasn't my fault. No, far from it. He loved me, and we loved hanging out. I mean, we went camping together as a family. We went on fishing trips together. You know, him and me. We cut down Christmas trees together. We built things together. I did yard work with him, and I loved doing it. And I built a fort in the backyard with him. Yeah, I grew up in central Wisconsin, so we had a pretty big backyard. And, you know, you could call it a tree house or you could call it a watchtower, but we called it a fort. And I built that with him. And I can't remember exactly what year it was, but it was awesome. And I haven't really been a part of a big project like that since. Maybe that's what my life is missing. But, you know, it's tough. It's tough because you kind of wish that, I don't know, this might sound weird. And if you haven't been through something like this, you're really not going to get it. And especially if you're not a guy, you're not going to fully get it. But it was almost like a part of me who almost wishes that he was murdered so I could take my anger out on someone else so that I could seek revenge. You know what I mean? There was that denial process. There you go. 5 stages of grief. You know, the first thing that you go through is denial. At first, I couldn't accept that my dad killed himself. Did I accept right away that he was dead? Yeah, I did. Because the day that it happened, I remember seeing him. He said something to my brother, my brother was a teenager at the time, and they were having a pretty rocky relationship. You know, you go through your teenage years. It's normal. You're just going to have a rocky relationship with your parents. It's just, I went through that. That's just how it is. And then after he had I don't know what he talked about with my brother after he had a conversation with him. That was the last time I saw him. I didn't think much of it. I just, you know, it was none of my business what they were talking about. I was trained at that point in my life to keep my nose out of other people's business like that. I mean, I still get curious over other people's business still, but, you know, who doesn't? A sister of mine took me out on a sleigh ride that same day, and then we come back. I'm watching Christmas specials in the living room, and it's dinner time. And we're like, well, okay, well, where's Dad, you know? We haven't seen him since X time this morning. The inevitable had to be done, and the police had to be called. And that's when they were able to follow the foot tracks in the snow to the location where they found his body with a gun. Apparently, his plan was that he wanted the train going by to discover him. So I know this can be used against me. I know I'm probably going to accrue some enemies with this channel, and they're going to see this, and they're going to probably rub it in my face. Say, look, I'm going to tell you right now, I've been dealing with that already. Like, it's mostly in my youth, not so much anymore, of course, because, you know, adults tend to be a lot more civilized, at least face-to-face. But when I was a kid, kids are often not as civilized, and they can often be a little brutal. And so I've had bullies, you know, make fun of my dad's death, and I would retaliate. But, you know, it wasn't until much later that I realized I don't want to form my own demons over this. You know, I can't do that. I cannot give power over to something that already has enough power and doesn't deserve any of it. You know, it was already tough growing up without a dad, you know, going through the teenage years and the rebellious years, and you're typically rebellious against a dad and he's not there. Or you're learning how to drive or work on your car and you don't have the dad that knows it all there. Everyone needs a father figure to grow up with. And this was the early 90s. Suicide, for whatever reason around that time, I don't want to say it was growing rampant, but it wasn't uncommon. In fact, it was pretty common. I mean, you'd hear about it a lot more around that time. And, well, let's see, we're going probably about 30 years after Vietnam, and we're well in a Desert Storm at that time, right? Or at least right at the tail end of Desert Storm. So, you know, there's already, I'm sure, a lot of veterans that are taking their own lives. The very next year, my grade school friend, my best friend in grade school, his father also took his own life. It was not unheard of in the early to mid-90s. So recently I thought Our Lady, Queen of Heaven, Mother of God, Virgin Mary, likely looked down upon this big Catholic family in central Wisconsin and thought, you know who they need? They need this young martyr, this princess, this family needs you, especially this child right here. Dymphna, you will be this child's princess, and this child, when he grows up, he will be your knight. Now, why did I put it that way? Why did I say that? Because several months ago, in fact, this could have happened late last year, in fact. I can't exactly get my timeline correct on this, so bear with me. I've just been having a lot more experiences lately, and I really don't want to BS you because, yes, I think some of these things could have happened in my head, but there are some things that I experienced spiritually that definitely did not happen in my head, and I cannot wait to go over those in future videos. But I will talk about this one real quick. I was making a daily habit of praying the rosary every single day. And around this time, I was praying only 5 mysteries. So if it was a Monday, I would pray the joyful mysteries. If it was a Tuesday, the sorrowful, Thursday, luminous. And then there was just some arbitrary Saturday where I come back home from confession and I decide to pray 10 mysteries back to back. So I prayed the joyful mysteries and I guess the luminous mysteries right after, or was it the sorrowful? In one succession. And as soon as once I got done with the joyful mysteries and as soon as I got started on the luminous, you hear about this a lot from Gabby after hours. But it's kind of hard to explain because it's not a voice that you're hearing in your ear. Although there was one time that did happen to me. This wasn't that time. It was a voice that I heard in my heart, in my head, not saying that one of my mental illnesses is that I hear voices in my head. Because this was only one time. Right when I get started with the Luminous Mysteries, I heard the soft female voice in my heart that said, "My little warrior, you never give up." I don't know about you, but whether you hear this in your ear or hear this in your heart, when you hear this, that lights a fire under you. If you thought that was pretty cool, well, I'm only just getting started. I can't wait to tell you my little story about what led me to reading this book. Because it literally involved God tossing it off of my bookshelf right in front of me. Out of nowhere. That doesn't happen ever. So anyway, let's get back into talking about experiences. This is going to be fun. I could go on and on about how my favorite color is green, and it just reminds me of summer, and yeah, it's the color of the Green Bay Packers. You might have heard of them. They're a football team in Wisconsin, right? And I love Celtic music, and I love all things Irish. And yeah, I love things out of Belgium too. That's minor. That's absolutely nothing, but these are things that do relate to Dymphna's life and culture. But it was this one thing that really caught my attention. Now, okay, I understand the psychology behind it. I understand that. How does Doctor Who put it again? Back when Doctor Who was good, back in okay, I'm talking about the revival Doctor Who, back when that was good. When they explain Bad Wolf, it's something that, you always hear, but you never really think much of until you start putting focus on it, and then you're hearing it all the time. Well, for me, it was a combination of numbers. So it wasn't just one number. It was a combination of numbers. And, all right, yeah, you could say, yeah, look, that's just a psychology thing. All right, I'll tell you what. We'll revisit this topic. I'm going to start collecting each and every single time I see that number, and I'm going to present it to you in a collage. And then I'll let you be the judge. But it was a combination of numbers, 515, and I would see it everywhere. I'd see, on Van Halen cover, 5150. I would see 515 in video games. I would see it on license tags. I would see it on street names, flight. I would just see it. I'd see it everywhere. 515. 515. So what is so grand about 515? I don't know. It was a mystery. I don't know if it was God trying to tell me that something was supposed to happen on May 15th, or 5:15 a.m., or 5:15 p.m. It's just a combination of numbers I still, to this day, see often. So life would go on like that. In fact, 515, it just became such a constant combination of numbers that there was one May 15th in 2020 that I decided to just make my own personal holiday because it was such a beautiful day in southern Wisconsin, and I decided to take a PTO day. And I wanted to just, everything else was closed, so I went out on a hike. I went on a big, long walk on a trail, and I just wanted to be in nature and just surrounded by green. And when you see artwork of St Dymphna, the main colors used are often green and white. Sometimes you'll see red and blue, too. Well, anyway, switching gears for a little bit. It was May 15th, May 3rd of this year that I went on a pilgrimage for Our Lady of Champion. 21-mile long hike in Champion, Wisconsin. It was from Green Bay to Champion to celebrate the apparition of Our Lady of Champion, who appeared to Sister Adele Brees, who, by the way, is from Belgium. It's all connected, man. What happened in Champion, Wisconsin? Well, the Virgin Mary appeared to Sister Adele Brees to explain to her to teach children proper catechism, to go to confession and how to properly receive the Eucharist. And Wisconsin is also, well, at the time, around the 1800s, it was a very popular immigration state for the German, the French, and the Irish, and Belgians. So Sister Adele Brees is, or was, Belgian. Anyway, I was on this hike, this pilgrimage, 21 miles. At the end of it, we get to the National Shrine of Our Lady of Champion. I am burnt out. I am exhausted. I want to see more of the shrine, but I also just kind of want to relax already. So I get my medal, for completing the hike, and I get on the bus to get to my car back to the, back at the hotel to drive back home. And the very next day, I went to church, and then that was it. And I just stayed in bed, and I watched Sonic 2 on Paramount Plus. That was a great day. But, I got on the phone with my sister, and she asked me, well, did you see the Veil of Mary, or one of the Veils of Mary? Because, there was apparently supposed to be second-class relics of Mary at the National Shrine of Our Lady of Champion. I was like, darn it, you know what? I didn't, because I was exhausted. I could barely move by the end of the 21-mile pilgrimage. I know, I'm such a wimp. So I fully intended to, at some point in the summer, to go back up to Champion, Wisconsin and revisit the National Shrine. And I've since done that twice now, and both times brought my sister with me. And got to see more of the relics, got to see more of the church, got to see the... I'm just going to have to do a separate video on it because there's so much to go over. Anyway, got some souvenirs at the gift shop, and outside of the gift shop in the same building, there's a little cafe where you can get a sandwich, eat some lunch, and you could also buy some bags of coffee. So there's different coffee bags there. So there's like an Our Lady of Guadalupe roast. There's a St. Michael the Archangel roast, St. Joseph, Terror of Demons roast. But then there is this coffee bag, this attractive coffee bag that I've never seen, of a saint that I've never seen before, of my favorite color on it, by the way, green. It was a St Dymphna half-calf roast. And I was honestly looking to kind of cut down on my caffeine usage. So I thought, half-calf, that would be perfect. Because I am a coffee connoisseur. I will try. I'm not picky when it comes to coffee. I don't think I've ever had a bad coffee yet, to be honest. I don't remember having a coffee I didn't like. I love all sorts of different brands. I even like Folgers. I love coffee, decaf, caffeine, half-calf. I love it. So I kind of feel like St. Dymphna spoke to me through my love of coffee. So I bought this St. Dymphna coffee from the Catholic Coffee Company. And they have a little story about her on the side of the bag. So I got to learn about a new saint, which is great. And I was like, wow, that's a really dark story. But I love her patronage. I love that she's the patron saint of mental illness. Because I live in an area of Wisconsin where that's a hot topic indeed. In fact, you could say everywhere in Wisconsin, that's a hot topic, mental illness, because I'm sure depression thrives very strongly out here. So then I thought, I'm just going to research this saint a little bit more. I want to learn more about her. And I found out what her feast day was before. So I mentioned earlier in this video that her feast day was May 30th. But her original feast day was May 15th. Wow. Okay. St. Dymphna has been trying to get my attention my whole entire life. And she finally succeeded on my second visit to the National Shrine of Our Lady of Champion. And she spoke to me, finally got my attention fully by exploiting my love of coffee. So I'll tell you what, pay attention to all sorts of signs. Put your life under a microscope. Because you never know what you're going to discover. You never really know. You might think that your patron saint is St. Jude, when in fact it's actually St. Rita. Or your patron saint is St. Maria Goretti, when it's actually Padre Pio. You don't know. Until you really research the saints and really pay attention to the signs around you, because they are trying to communicate with you. They are trying to get your attention. I just told you the story about how St. Dymphna got my attention. And it was It's awesome when you find it out. There's no feeling that relates to it. Well, anyway, I already burned enough of your time. This has been a long enough video, and I've given myself plenty to edit because I've had plenty of pauses and fumbles and stumbles that I need to edit out for brevity, for a cleaner video. And thank you very much for watching, by the way. My name is Luke. This is Dymphna's Devotion. And in my next video, or in one of my future videos, I don't know about my next video, but we are going to talk about some St Dymphna artwork soon. We're going to talk about the canvas I bought from a little seller on Etsy. We'll get into that in the next video. But I also want to talk about, earlier I mentioned when I peeked behind the veil, real thing. I might have a subscriber that can probably attest to this. Do not do this. Do not meddle in the occult. What did I do? Did I play with a new Ouija board? No, not quite. But we'll get into that in another video. So I have plenty of content that I'm working on. Thank you very much for watching again. If you like this video, go ahead, like it. If you want to subscribe to see more, you're going to get more. I promise you. I'm not going to promise you that I'm going to be able to get a video out like every week. Sometimes there might be a long gap between videos because this is not my full-time job, as you can tell. I have a job I have to commute to. Half hour there, half hour back. Yeah. So my time is limited, and plus I love to pray. I love to study up. Stay active in my faith, and I think you should too. And if you want to be a Catholic voice on this platform, I think you should be. I'll see you next time. God bless.